Well, I want to welcome everybody back to another episode of the Empower Grief Journey podcast. I'm your host, Chris Mamoni, and I'm an acceptance coach who helps people heal from grief, loss, and trauma to discover their self-acceptance and step into their personal power. This podcast is your dedicated space for healing, growth, and transformation. Each episode shares insightful and inspirational stories, along with practical tools and actionable insights that can help guide you along your healing journey. Today, I have an awesome guest for you guys. Her name is Kaitlin. She's a wife and a mother navigating the delicate balance of parenting her three boys on Earth while grieving the loss of her daughters, Esme, Adelaide, and Lainey. Her journey through love and loss has shaped her passion for creating a compassionate space where grieving mothers can find connection, support, and understanding. Through her work, Kaitlin provides a community for mothers who have experienced loss, ensuring that they never feel alone. She believes in honoring every child's life, sharing stories, and holding space for both grief and healing. With an open heart and a firsthand experience of navigating motherhood after loss, Kaitlin is dedicated to walking alongside other moms, offering light, hope, and the reminder that even in grief, they're not alone. And without further ado, I want to welcome Kaitlin to the podcast.
Thank you, Chris. It's an honor to be here, truly. I think you're doing great work and yeah, I'm excited to talk to you and yeah, share my story. So,
Well, I'm excited to have you on because personally, I like to say we're part of the fan club nobody wants to be part of, unfortunately.
yes.
Um,
Yes.
but I was excited to talk to you because I love t connecting with lost parents who have lost
Mm,
children because, as you know, and you've experienced like me, it can be very isolating, very alone. People don't always say the right thing in front of us and kind of make us feel like it's something we shouldn't talk about as an uncomfortable subject. So, I want to give you the floor to share with our listeners today, just your story, and I'll be quiet here.
no, you're good. No, I think you're absolutely correct. And honestly, that is what made me start my podcast and just really connecting with the lost community and like other lost parents who you know, um, I don't want people to feel alone in this journey because it is a really, really hard journey and it is a really isolating journey, like you said. Um, so yeah, I'll just share my story. So, my husband and I, we have two boys, and they are currently about to be 10 and 7. So when they were younger, um, in about 2021, we decided we wanted to grow our family again. Well, I decided. My husband, it took him a few years, but I got him on board. And um, once we did, we got pregnant pretty quickly. But unfortunately, we lost our first daughter at our 20-week ultrasound is when we found out that we lost her. She had actually been measuring 16 weeks and we didn't know anything, we didn't know it until the 20-week ultrasound. And I think that first loss really just, you're so naive to loss before you experience it. So that really hit us hard. And it took us a long time to really understand, to find some answers. So once we did, we got the go ahead to try again. I was determined I really wanted another baby. So we did, and unfortunately, we lost our second daughter at 13 weeks. Same thing, we went in for another routine ultrasound, and we found out she no longer had a heartbeat as well. And that's hard. Um, two losses, in a row. It's like, gosh, what's wrong? So of course we did a lot of testing, more testing. And of course the doctors couldn't find anything wrong. They said, just really bad luck, and, bad circumstances. Unfortunately, there was nothing that they could do to prevent anything at that point. Um, so we saw a fertility specialist, and again, we did some basic like protocols that lost parents do, or recurring loss, I guess is what they call it. So we got the go ahead to try again, and we did, and we got pregnant pretty quickly again. And once again, we found out we were having our third girl. So we were, over the moon. We were like, okay, this is it. We've had two losses. Um, you know, we're not going to have three. That's silly, that just doesn't happen. And I had a good pregnancy for the most part. We made it through all the big milestones. And then when I was 37 weeks pregnant, I woke up that morning and I just had not felt her move. So I knew something was wrong right away. I think you just know as a mom, carrying a baby and having been through loss before. Um, so I actually had a already scheduled appointment that day. Um, so I went in and I called them on my way just to let them know, hey, I think something's going on. And unfortunately, when I got there, they confirmed my worst nightmare. Our third daughter no longer had a heartbeat. And um, I won't say any loss is worse than another because, there's really no comparing losses. I mean, a loss is a loss. It's your baby, but when you are 2 weeks away from meeting your child and you go in and, they are no longer living, it's definitely not an experience I would ever wish on anybody. And, we ended up delivering her later that day, and we got to spend time with her and hold her and kiss her and, love her, all the things. And we actually let our older two boys come and meet her. That's something that my husband and I really, really wanted for them because you know, um, we wanted closure for them too. A lot of people don't realize that siblings also grieve. And for them, them being a little older, I think, it really did help them heal. It helped with their grieving process because, they were expecting a baby to come home as well. You plan for a baby, and then with our first two losses, they didn't really understand because again, it was, a little earlier, but we had everything set up and like we were ready to bring her home. So, yeah, we did get some backlash on that from some people, but I don't regret it at all just because again, I do feel like siblings also need that space to grieve. Um so yeah, I really was really glad that we did that because again, it did help them, and we were able to get pictures as a family. The nurses came in and
Mm.
were able to give her a bath and give us pictures, which are forever memories for us. So yeah, I after I lost her, I really it was tough. It was a very hard journey. It still is. And honestly, that's one of the reasons I talk about it. Talking about it for me does help. It helps me heal, and I do feel like what you said earlier, people think it's like a taboo subject. Don't talk about your baby loss. Don't talk about your babies that are in heaven, but for me, that's still my baby. I'm going to talk about my baby. I'm going to talk about, you know, them and because they are still part of my family. So it does help me to be able to help others and to just let other people know, you're not alone. I see you, this pain is real, it's valid, you're okay. If you need to talk about it, I'm here. If you need to listen, I'm here. So I'm really glad we connected. And unfortunately, like you said, it's no club that any parent wants to be a part of ever. Um, but again, I feel like God leads us to the people that we need. And, for me, like being here today, I feel like we connected for a reason.
I'm
So,
really glad you said that because I've met so many beautiful people in the lost community, and it's
yeah.
like we've said, it's a club we don't want to be part of, but I've met such beautiful people through it, and they've been I've only experienced a stillbirth. I haven't gone through it multiple times like some people I've met have. I've met women that have had 5 or 6
Oh,
miscarriages. I mean,
yeah.
I was shaking my head in the room when I saw that a year ago, and I just went, how are you still trying? Like how, I mean,
Right.
I'm devastated that I lost my son, and it still hurts today like it did when it happened.
Yeah.
So I have a special place in my heart for parents that go through that many times because what I saw is a lot of strength. Saw a lot of empathy. I saw a lot of just compassion and love and kindness, and that's something that is very profound in the lost community. And so
Hmm.
you hit on so many good topics about this. I'm trying to remember everything
Oh,
about your
you're okay.
story, but
Yeah. Mhm.
it being a taboo subject, I do want to touch on
Mhm.
that because after I lost my son, I was looking for support groups on Facebook, and I could not believe the number of people that would say really hurtful, demeaning comments
Yeah.
for people sharing pictures of their child. And I'll be honest, I saw some pictures that shook me a little bit. It was hard to see,
Mhm.
but then this thing kicked in me and said, they went through what you just went through. And
Yeah.
yeah, it might have been 20 weeks, might have been 25 weeks or 30 weeks or whatever it is. It doesn't even matter at that point because I saw a parent that loves their child all the same. And
Yes.
um it didn't matter. It just like I saw people saying like, "Oh, that picture is disgusting. How can you show a picture of your dead child?" And I was going,
Right.
"Guys, you don't get it because you haven't experienced it." But that woman carried that child in her for however long that child lived.
Mhm.
And um I remember a time the hospital after we gave birth to Caden, and my wife was really adamant about getting a picture of his butt. And
Oh,
I didn't fully understand, by the way, because I was in a daze of that whole moment. But
yes.
um, I realized looking back on the pregnancy, my wife always was petting her stomach in a certain spot, and that's where his butt was, is right where she pet.
Yes.
And she made a comment in that moment and said, I pet this little guy's butt for 9 months. And it's just a
Yes.
very
Oh,
heartwarming thing.
yeah.
It's not a tragic, hide it away, it's taboo, don't talk about it. It's a very beautiful moment of life.
Absolutely.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I totally agree with you. I love that for you and for her. You want those memories to remember them because again, they're still part of your family, and your wife grew him for, 9 months and you know, so I get that. Yeah.
So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about this aspect of this topic because I think a lot of people um, I've talked a lot about, safe people in this podcast that to talk to people that are not safe. I wanted to ask you on your journey,
Yeah.
because I ran into people, I won't really say who just for anonymity reasons, but I'll just say I
Hmm.
got told things like, oh, well, you make beautiful babies. It'll happen again. Oh, don't worry
Oh,
about it. It'll happen in the right
I
time.
know.
Did you ever have experiences like that when you went through your losses, or did you find yourself really trying to figure out who was safe and not safe to talk about as you grieved the losses of your daughters?
Yes. And it's unfortunate. You do find your safe people, I would say. If we'll call them that. Um, People who are definitely understanding and will give you that space to talk about them. Um, like, just like you and I are talking. But then you have those people, and again, and even if they're trolls online, which to me, I just don't understand that. Like, I will never understand, how you can comment on something that you don't even know, like you don't have experience with. Um, but yes, I will say, I feel like you really, when you go through a tragedy like this and you're going through grief, you do find those people that are going to be there for you, that are going to matter. And again, even if it's someone close to you and you have to say, you know what, you're not a safe person in this chapter, and sometimes it's unfortunate. So, um, yeah, I definitely think that that's definitely a real thing. So,
Yeah, I remember I was in a group on Facebook, and this woman lost her child very recently. I think this happened about 3 months ago, if I remember right.
mhm,
And we just got to talking, and I said, hey, I really understand where you're at right now, and I'm not going to say that this is going to be easy for you because it's going to be hard. And I said I want to make sure you feel comfortable doing what you're doing. I saw some people troll her and I at the same time because we traded pictures. And we had a really nice moment. This mom that just lost her baby.
yeah.
And anyway,
And I don't,
the thing that shocked me was is when these trolls hit the website, all of a sudden these lost parents came out like a bunch of lion
oh
cubs, like
yeah.
you kicked a bear the wrong way.
Yep.
And right
Hmm.
before I even had a chance to say anything, all these people were like, "You leave these two alone. These people just lost their kids. Don't say
Yeah.
anything." And I was going, whoa,
Exactly.
what? You know?
Yeah. I even had a few people close to me, like in person, say, well, could it be this, could it be this reason? Is it because they were all girls? People suggesting things. And it's like, first of all, you don't know my story. You don't know what tests we've been through. You don't know, you just don't know. So why are you even commenting? And again, I think the internet trolls are the worst. And it's like, you know, until you really face the grief and the tragedy of losing a child, you have no room to talk about it, or say
Yeah.
anything about it. So,
I wanted to
yeah.
ask you too, because something that was, I've been curious to ask another lost parent this question.
Yeah.
After going through losing a child, I feel like the volume in your head just gets turned down like really low. Like
Hmm.
things that you thought were problems in life just don't become problems anymore. They're just like don't even hit the radar.
Yes.
Have you experienced that going through those losses that you went through that something it's almost like your priorities shifted about what you
Oh
give
yeah.
energy to?
Yep. 100%. I will say for me, I'm definitely not the same mom that I was before I lost my daughters. Especially Lainey, that, losing her, um, it really shifted my motherhood journey as well. But it also shifted how I parent my other two. It shifted how I love my husband. It just shifted everything, my whole life. Um, just really you have a new perspective on life, I think. It really opens your eyes like to just really enjoy the little moments. And I know it's hard, and I know, like, if you're listening to this and you're going through it, there will be a day when grief and joy can coexist. And I know that is really hard to believe when you're in the midst of your grief journey, but I do believe it. It's funny because my boys and I we call them glimmers of joy. So there was, shortly after
Mm.
we lost Lainey, we would look for just little glimmers of joy, even if it was just the sun shining, or, just something funny in each day. Um, so yeah, I definitely think your mindset changes, your whole life changes, really.
I want to touch on another topic you brought up about
Yeah,
sharing those losses with your two boys. I know
yeah.
that there's a lot of opinions I'm sure that'll fly around with that one, and I'm one of those
Mm-hmm.
people that ignores that because
Yep.
I respect every parent's individuality for how they want to deal with things, and it's
Sure.
part of why I say that is I went to a loss community event and there were about 40 families in there and I cannot describe the amount of loss. I'll cry if I talk about it, but I'll just say
Oh
that
yeah.
I saw a lot of empathy, compassion, and love and
Mm-hmm.
kindness. And the best part of that whole room was there was no judgment in that room. There
Mm-hmm.
was no somebody did this wrong or I wouldn't have done that. There was none of that in the room. There was just acceptance for how people handle those situations in their own.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that's really beautiful that you shared that with your boys. And I was going to ask, if that was hard for them at that point, or if they had an understanding of what was going on. But I just thought that was beautiful that you shared that with them, regardless of the outcome, because at the same point, they're still family. And to give them that experience, in my own opinion, was a very good thing. And I think that really
Mm.
created a holistic idea of family for you guys. What was that experience like for you?
Yeah, thank you so much for asking about that. Again, we went back and forth on it when we were in the hospital, really just, my husband and I just deciding, because that it was my idea initially, and I was just really adamant about it. I thought, um, especially with them being a little older, maybe if they were younger at the time, I probably my decision maybe would have been a little different. But at the time, they were 6 and 8. And so in my opinion, that's old enough to understand, in life you are going to face losses. And, unfortunately, that's our reality. So for me, and again, like, we planned for Lainey, we had everything set up for her. We were talking about like all the things that we were going to do with her, and the boys were just so excited to have a sister. And so for them, I do really think it was healing in a way, because for the especially the first couple months after we lost her, we just really, I mean, it was just tears, like the whole house, you know. Um, but I will say that the hospital also helped with the whole thing. They gave us like a little book and little like stuffed elephants to remember her, which I thought was really awesome, you know. And so yeah, I don't regret it at all. I would make the same decision, you know, if I had to do it again, which, you know, um, maybe you can cut that part out.
No, that was
Um,
fine. Yeah.
yeah, I just, you know, I really think, you know, it was healing for them. I will say, we did all do counseling afterwards, and that also helped. But I don't think that um, meeting their sister, you know, was a bad thing.
And I really think it's just powerful because, I if I was in the same boat, I'll be fair with you, I'd do the same thing. That's just
Yeah,
me.
yeah. Again, you know, it's just that it's a personal decision, you know, as a parent, but also, you know, you have to think about in the long run. Like in my mind, I was thinking, you know, that they'll get to meet her one day, but I want them to meet her here on Earth. I want them to be able to kiss her if they choose, to hold her one time if they choose. And I will say one of my boys did and the other didn't. But again, that was their decision. They were old enough, you know, to decide. But I wanted them to at least have the opportunity to meet her, to say goodbye, to have that closure.
I think the big thing I just took away from what you said is you empowered your children, and this is what I think is
Yes.
so powerful about your conversation.
Yeah.
Is you empowered your children to make that choice. You gave it to them and said, "Here's an option, and I want you to experience this. But if you don't want to, that's okay."
Yeah.
I think that's very powerful as a parent.
Thank you. Yeah, you know, and again, none of these decisions are easy, you know, when you're going through, especially when you're going through grief. You can't think straight, you know. So, yeah, it was, you know, but again, it was just a decision that I really thought was best for them.
My one of my other questions I have for you about the lost community because I've seen this one happen so many directions when it
Mhm.
comes to losing a child. There's couples that stay together through that. There's couples that don't. It's really becomes a very heavy topic in marriage and something that isn't very well discussed, as I've come to find, is really how does that impact that relationship and I just want to let you know you don't have to share the nth details about that if you're uncomfortable, but I just want to ask if you are comfortable sharing that. What was the difference between, your husband grieving and how you grieve?
Mhm.
And, were there conversations where you guys were able to come together and work through that? What did that process look like for you guys?
Sure, yeah. So I will say you again hit the nail on the head. Men and women grieve so differently, especially if you're different, you know, and my husband and I are complete opposites. Um, but for us, you know, we're still grieving, but we're grieving differently, still. But at the same time, I do feel like it has made our marriage stronger. Just because, you know, we've gotten through so much in a short period of time. We've been together almost 9 years this year, and in that time, we've had, you know, 5 pregnancies. So that's a lot, you know. Um, but at the same time, we, when it comes to grieving, I will say, for me, talking about it, like I said before, was definitely my way of healing and connecting with others and just being able to talk, you know, talk out my grief. But for him, he is very like closed off. He doesn't want to talk about it as much. Very like just put up a wall, you know, which I feel like is can be typical for some men, you know, not all, of course. Um, and I think part of me too, I'm raising boys that will become men. So part of my thought process when I was going through all of that also was, you know, I want my boys to be able to have those emotions and have that sympathy and empathy and be able to show that, you know. So I think that it's normal, you know, for your marriage to go through the waves when you're in the depths of grief. And I will say, there's been times where, we haven't liked each other very much because, we're grieving differently. And but for me, again, just talking it out, being able to really, even crying it out. And for me, uh, he's not a crier, but I will say when you lose a child, that will change, that will change you. And so, yeah, but we will come together in conversation and like help each other heal. And I think it's just really understanding that people do grieve differently. Even two women can grieve differently.
I think that's a really powerful point to make because when I went to this lost parent event, the men were really quiet. It was kind of interesting.
Mhm.
We didn't really
Mhm.
talk. It was just like standing there and hi, I acknowledge you kind of thing. But then at the same time, the women there though were very open about it, very much want to talk about it, very much want to, and I love how it wasn't a conversation like, oh, this terrible thing happened to me. That was the other really unique thing that I saw. It was always talking about their children by name. It was always saying
Yes.
how grateful they were, how beautiful they were, talking about their experience. It was such an interesting dynamic to be in because you think it's this very heavy, very dark, very sad thing, and then it's just this very come together understanding of people. And yeah, there were a lot of tears that day. I'll tell you that. That was not
Yeah.
a dry
Yeah.
room by any means. Um,
Sure.
but I did notice with men though, it was very much, we don't have a lot of support for us to actually understand our emotions. And
Mhm.
as a lost parent, I can say I cried a lot when I lost my
Mhm.
kid. I probably cried
Mhm.
more when I lost him than any moment of my life.
Sure.
I still do every year. Funny story, because it just
Yeah.
doesn't go away. But
Right.
I love that you pointed out that men and women grieve differently. I love that you
Mhm.
pointed that out. And one of the stereotypes I've been breaking lately is that when people say women are overly emotional, I say, no, they're taught how to feel their emotions. That's why they do that.
Yes.
And
I love that.
that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing.
No.
Um, Us men, we're not taught how to feel emotions, and that's a bad thing. We should be taught how to feel emotions and that it's
Mhm.
okay for us to cry. It doesn't mean we're weak.
Absolutely.
Vulnerability is a strength.
Yeah, no, I love that. Again, that's one of the reasons I'm raising my boys. I want them to show me their emotions, because that's okay, just because you're a boy, you're allowed to cry.
I love that you're raising your kids that way because I remembered as you just said that when we first talked, and I remember
Yeah,
telling you that I love that you're raising men like that because
yeah,
that's what really is strength as a man. Is I was brought up the other way of don't feel,
sure.
don't cry, suck it up, be a man. And
Mhm.
it's a really hard thing that I've come to find as I got older in my life that I was like, no, I do have feelings about this, and
Yep.
this doesn't make me weak. This makes me a human. It makes me
Mhm.
a person
Exactly.
that
Yes.
experiences things. Um,
Yes.
so I love that you're teaching your boys that it's okay to cry. It's okay to feel sad. It's okay to
Yeah.
express that.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Again, it's just breaking generational curses, right? We got to do that.
Yes. Well, I think that's the key, and that's
Yeah.
the reason I talk so much about my son all the time is, yes, it helps me heal, and that's, part of the
Mhm.
equation. But the other half is I'm trying to show men that you may experience this. I sure as hell hope you don't, by the way.
Right.
I don't wish that upon anybody. But I'll
Right.
just say that if you do, I don't want you to miss out on that experience because I do
Mhm.
feel that being in connection with your emotions, being present, and being vulnerable, that's the best thing you could do in that moment. I know that sounds weird saying that for such a tragic thing, but to be open with yourself enough to say this hurts, this is a loss.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you on that. I don't think like my husband and I couldn't have gotten through it without each other. So being able to, know that he was at least there for me and supporting me. And, I think another part of it was him trying to be the man, you know, um, and trying to be the tough one, if you will.
Hmm.
Because again, I was, inconsolable most days for months. So I think, again, that's another stereotype, that you guys have to be the tough ones. But I don't think that's, true. I think, we're both allowed to be vulnerable. We're both allowed to cry, so yeah.
I love that you brought up that there were days that you guys didn't like each other when this happened because I went through the same thing and what's funny too is that I love by the way that you said your marriage got stronger because that's
Hmm.
exactly what happened between my wife and I.
Hmm.
I don't remember much of this moment. My wife does. I always like to share this because I kind of blacked out and spaced out that day. We
Sure.
went to the hospital, so I don't have much memory of certain things. But she told me in that moment we were going to the hospital to deliver, she said, the thing I remember is that you said, we're going to go meet our son today. And I don't remember saying that for
Yeah.
whatever reason, but she did. And I was glad that she told me that because
Yeah.
that made that memory just a little better for me. But back to what you said though about being stronger, I think it really does test a marriage big time
Mm.
because you're
Yes.
dealing with different grief, you're dealing with different emotions, you're also dealing with lots of childhood patterns and emotional
Yeah.
behaviors were taught. Like I said, men are taught a certain way, women are taught a certain way.
Hmm.
And depending on your family environment, you were raised a certain way. So I think in this lost community of things, when this happens, all of that stuff comes roaring to the front. And it really is a test on a marriage. It really is. And,
Yeah.
there,
I absolutely agree, and I find it really unfortunate. I've seen a lot in some of my lost groups that I'm in on Facebook. I see people, posting how, their marriage didn't survive or their relationship didn't survive this. And it makes me sad. It breaks my heart. But I get it at the same time, because it's a path that nobody wants to be on. And, when you're in the, like, again, when you're in the depths of that grief and it's sometimes you just can't pull yourself out of it. It's like, how do you get through each day, let alone, working on your marriage, But for us, it was, I'm very thankful. For us, it was just important to, really, um, make it, make it work, make our marriage stronger. Um, Yeah. So and I'm
yeah,
thankful.
it really is. I feel weird saying that. There's a lady I did a podcast with earlier this week. She came up with this term. I can't say the word half the time.
It's okay.
Brutiful. Um,
Oh,
and
yeah,
and
yeah.
she and she said that the moment you're trying to describe, she said I have a word for this. She says it way better than me. You guys will hear that episode down the road, but she said it's such a brutal moment that's also so
Yeah.
beautiful at the same time.
Yep.
And and that's what I have found with a lot of people when I talk about my son. They look at me like, "You're talking what? Like what? I don't know how
I
to
know.
respond to this." And
Yeah.
I say, I can go down that road of those negative emotions. I can, and they're
Yep.
there all the time, readily accessible. But I choose to focus on celebrating my son, and that's something that I wanted to ask you about with your
Yeah.
daughters. I every year for my son on his birthday, we make a cake for him, and we make a grandiose, crazy triple layer cake. My wife shakes her head at me all
Oh,
the time.
I love
Um,
that.
and we
Yeah.
put and his thing is a lion, so we put like a jungle theme and lions on the
Oh,
cake. We have a whole mom and pop lion, baby lion, whole thing. I wanted to ask you, do you guys celebrate your daughters every year? And what's that like for you guys?
yeah. So we sure do. So Lainey would have turned 1 in August, this past August. So, it was her first birthday. So we got a cake and the boys sang and um we we got the all three girls little pink stockings and we hang them up on their shelf every year.
Oh.
So that's fun. And then their first Christmas, we had asked family if they could, fill their stocking with just like a simple love note or something, something sweet to remember them. So, I had a couple people get them an ornament, which was really nice because I feel like that's always, a nice way to remember them, like around the holidays. We have ornaments for all of them with their names on them. And then something else we do is, so where I'm at in Ohio, we have a local group, which I absolutely love. It's called Forget Me Not Baskets. And so when parents face unimaginable loss, they donate a basket to like the hospitals. And so basically, you have like this box and it's like a basket, but it's a box of like just like little remembrance things, like like a little stuffed elephant, like a pin, just different things, books, all the fun things, but a nice way to remember your babies. Anyway, this forget me not baskets, they also do different like grief things throughout the year. So they're going to do like a Mother's Day brunch. They do just like different activities for parents to remember their babies. And one of them is the 5K run, and you can do it in honor of your babies. So we do that every year. This will be our second year doing it. So we just really find ways to remember them, but we also, my husband and I, we like to give back to the lost community. So we donate some baskets every year to the Forget Me Nots as well in honor of Lainey. Um, just because we want another family to have that comfort and support that we had. That's so important, to have things like that, in my opinion, because I'm sure there are people that don't, and for us it was everything, so yeah, we just find little ways to give back and to honor them.
I think that's really cool that you guys do that because my wife and I, ever since the first year we lost Caden, there's a ornament exchange with lost parents that we're on, and my wife does pottery, and I was doing woodworking when I had a shop back home, and we made ornaments for lost families, and
Oh, I love that.
the
Yes.
ornament exchange is awesome. You have to fill out a form, but you have to put on your child's name when they were born, and
Yeah.
like a little story about them. And just I'm sure you feel this with the forget me not baskets that you do, but isn't it such a like just such a warm gratitude type of environment that you're
Yes.
get that with the people
Yep.
that interact in that?
Absolutely. I will say I have made some really dear friends through Forget Me Nots. And we see each other, a few times a year at these events, and then of course, we stay in touch throughout the year. Um, but I will tell you again, we'll reiterate this, the lost community is not one that any of us would have ever chosen to be a part of, but it is the most beautiful community of people, truly like just loving and healing and just kind. It's the opposite of the unsafe people we were talking about. It's the people that you want there, to talk to and to go to cry and say, "Hey, I'm having a grief day. Can you be with me? Can you talk to me?" It's the most amazing community, truly.
Yeah, it's I was shocked at this lady. I think it was last year or the year before. She sent us this big lion. I mean, the thing was huge and it had like
Oh,
lights in it. And we didn't even know this for the longest time, but she actually engraved his name on it somewhere, like on the back.
oh,
And
that's so
we
sweet.
and I just like, yeah, I love the lost community because we put so much thought and so much energy
Hmm.
into making sure somebody has a nice Christmas gift and a nice, not
Oh, yeah.
forgotten.
Yep.
And it's just it's such a good feeling, and I feel sad that we lost children to get to that place. I
I
always
know.
feel icky about that, but at the same time, I'm just so grateful to have met those people on this path. Um, it's been
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. When I started my podcast, I had a couple people just kind of like, "Why are you doing that?" And my big thing, and it may sound a little cliche, but I wanted to find purpose in my pain. Again, like what you said, I didn't want to have a reason to do any of this, but I do, unfortunately. So here I am, and how can I use my pain to help others? And, how can I help remember my daughters? So I do think, just being able to do things like the ornament exchange and the 5K run and just be able to help other parents and, just through that grief journey.
I love what you said there because that's why I was so grateful to have you as a guest on my show today, to be very honest, is that you're such a good example of somebody that has taken that pain and transformed it into a big gift of empowerment to help other parents to go through this. And, I've had the experience of talking to parents that just lost their kids and just starting the journey that I've gone through and the one you've gone through multiple times. And I really do think I tend to call these moments like the gift and shitty wrapping paper. It's the one we don't want, but we got it.
Right.
And so like what do we do
Yep.
with it then?
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
And you know, it's really something when you come across a parent that says, "I just lost my kid. I am
Yeah.
lost. I am just my
Mm-hmm.
head is somewhere else." And to be able to sit there and say, not just that I've gone through this too, and it's not,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't even go down the road of even saying like, "Oh, I've done this. I'll help you get through it."
Mm-hmm.
It's being, I understand what you're going through right now. I'm here to listen. I'm not here to tell you
Yeah.
how to do this, but
Yeah.
I'm here to give you some space to say, here's to work through your emotions. Here's how to kind of give you some space to process these things. Because I think that, you know, when these things first happen, you're really like in shock. You're just in
Mm-hmm.
disbelief. You know, my wife went through a big shock when that happened, and she
Oh.
still has a hard time talking about it. And I don't blame her at all for
Mm-hmm.
that. And I don't think it's bottling things up. It's just, I try to tell people it's a very painful thing to go through, and it takes a lot of
Mm-hmm.
having safe people in a safe space to really process that. So it's really a big gift that you and I have in particular, that when we do run across parents that unfortunately become part of this club, we can not say we can fix you, we can't tell you that, or that this is going to get easier.
Right.
We can't say that, but we
Yeah.
can at least give that space to them to say, we've walked the walk that you're about to go down, and we're
Mm-hmm.
here to walk it with you. We're here to support you.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. That's absolutely. Yep. And that's again one of the reasons I really wanted to start my podcast because, not that I have great advice to give, again, I wouldn't choose this journey at all, but here's what has worked for me, take it, how you may, but here I'm here to offer my support, my love, so
So
yeah.
I want to ask you about your podcast. As
Yeah, yeah.
tell me a little bit about your podcast. Tell me a little bit about just some conversations you've had on there.
Yeah, so it's pretty new. So it's called Grief in Motherhood, actually. And I just kind of picked that because, again, I'm in the middle of grief and I'm in motherhood, and it's a journey again that I would not have chosen, but here I am, and I want to share that and share what it's like, walking that journey. Um, so it's funny that you asked because I actually started it right after I lost Lainey last year, a couple months after um I lost her in 2023. So I started it shortly after that, and shortly after that, shortly after, sorry, I keep saying that. Shortly after I scheduled and released my very first episode, I actually found out I was pregnant again. So I actually took a break from the podcast because mentally and emotionally, I could not talk about my losses while I was pregnant again. I will say we did have our happy ending. We have a 6-month-old little boy now. So we are, we have our rainbow baby, and I say that with lots of, gratitude because, we went through a lot to get him here, and there's a lot of emotions that come with that. But anyway, I could not bring myself to record anymore, just because I was so cautiously optimistic and hopeful, but at the same time, you're just so, so scared when you are in your pregnancy after loss. So for me, I had to just take a break. So, fast forward, he was born in September. So I actually jumped right back on the mic after he was born, and I've recorded a couple more episodes. So, I think I have three out. I have one releasing actually this week still, and then I have some more interviews lined up for some great people that I plan on talking to. So I'm really excited. Um, yeah, it's been great to just be able to express my emotions and my grief and just be able to share my story with other lost parents. So,
I really love that. I love that you're doing a topic on that because I see such a big need for it, especially on the mother side of things. I see a big need for somebody like you to come along and say, I'm going to talk about the uncomfortable thing. I'm going to get the
yeah.
elephant in the room out. I'm going to give a safe space for lost parents and moms to come on this show and just talk and feel safe enough to discuss that situation. Because that's like we talked about when we started this podcast, it's always such a taboo thing. And
Yep.
You
Hmm.
know, you always get told, I think that was the hardest thing for my wife was always people saying, oh, well, it'll happen again, just have faith. Or,
Hmm.
oh, you know, you make beautiful babies, you'll have another one. And those things are so, you know, dismissive,
Yeah.
and they write
Yeah.
off those experiences. And like you said, you know, getting pregnant again after loss, you know,
Hmm.
that is scary. And I'll be honest, I'm scared of that because
Sure.
I learned my lesson the hard way that
Yeah.
until that baby's in the world and breathing and you're at that point, anything's
Hmm.
up in the air. And I know some people are gonna be very scared that I just said that, but that's the brutal truth about pregnancy.
No, you're absolutely right. I will say that was probably the hardest thing I've done, besides losing Lainey and the girls, was going through my pregnancy with my son that we just had 6 months ago. I mean, that pregnancy was literally like holding your breath every single day. And of course, I was monitored extra this time. I'm obviously considered high risk, and I had all the prenatal care, but that still doesn't, again, equal a living baby until that baby is here and in your arms and healthy and alive. So it is scary. And again, I it takes a lot of hope, a lot of prayer, a lot of strength, but it's not impossible. So I do want to give people, that encouragement and that hope because although it may not be in the cards for some people, and again, that hurts my heart, but um, there is hope. So if if that's something that is laid on your heart, I just encourage you to pray and just to have that hope.
I think that's really huge because, you know, a lot of lost parents I've run into, I've seen the spectrum of that. I've seen women that are just, I'm not going to go through this again. Can't
Mm-hmm.
do it. And honestly, I can't blame you. I really
Yeah.
can't.
Oh,
I
absolutely. Yeah.
like I said, one for me was enough.
Mm-hmm.
That put
Mm-hmm.
me over the edge and then some. I also saw women that, like I said, had 5, 6 miscarriages and still continue to go on to have children. And so,
Yeah.
what I like to say about this process, and I'm just going to speak to the women I've seen in lost community.
Sure.
I've seen a lot of strength of women, and I
Mm-hmm.
have to say, physically, mentally, emotionally, I've seen some very strong women
Mm-hmm.
go through this process multiple times, and um, just to see that sheer strength
Yeah.
it gives me a lot of hope, and that's why my head has always stayed in this place of it'll happen again, and it's going to be on God's time. By the way, it won't be when I want
Yes.
it, but it's going to be when God says it's ready, and to
Yeah.
have faith in that aspect, but also see, like I said, see those women go through what I've seen them go through and still do it.
Mm-hmm.
And just to see how happy they are that they persevered through that, is just a big odious to strength and to just have faith and hope, like you said, that it can happen again.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I love that. Um, it does take that's what it takes. Honestly, you have to be, you have to be mentally prepared and just hopeful. And again, like you said, it is on God's terms. And even though it's not a journey that we want, it's not our journey to choose. So
Well, Caitlin, I want to say I just want to thank you so much for being on my podcast today. This has been an incredible episode. I enjoy talking to other lost parents because
yeah.
it's something I can relate to, but also
Hmm.
I like that they are able to share their story and share how
Yeah.
they went through things. Because as my listeners know on my podcast, the reason I do this podcast in the first place is that there is no one way to grieve. There's no one way to heal. It's a very personal journey that everybody has individually. And hearing your experiences of losing your daughters, how you navigated through that, and also, by the way, having your own podcast and being able to support other women in the
Yeah.
lost community, I think that is just so huge that you took your gift and shitty wrapping paper and turned that into some purposeful transmuted that pain into purpose to help other women that are going through
Yeah.
that and give them hope. I think that's such a beautiful gift.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I have really enjoyed talking to you, Chris, and I know again, we don't we don't want to be on this path together, but we are, and I'm very thankful we met. And yeah, I love what you're doing, especially from a man's point of view. I think it's great. I think it's great that you're able to talk about your son, talk about your grief, talk about your journey, and just share it with others. So I appreciate you having me on.
Well, so as we wrap up on my show, I always ask my guests the big question at the very end here, which is if you were to run into somebody who is just now experiencing grief and loss or trauma, or somebody who feels stuck in that, what are one or
Hmm.
two things that you would share with them that could help them navigate that just a little easier?
Sure. So I would say, um, honestly, take it one day at a time. That's my first thought. That I would say to them because every day is going to be different. There's going to be highs, there's going to be lows, there's going to be really high highs, there's going to be really low lows. Um, so take it one day at a time. And also, one of my biggest things, and I have an episode releasing about this soon, but it's on self-care, and that is so important. Really just remember to take care of yourself, even if that just means remembering to drink your water, remembering to, you know, just get some extra rest, just really take care of yourself because there's going to be days when you forget to eat. Honestly, when you're going through this grief, you're in a blur, you're in a daze. Um, so yeah, just take it one day at a time. Remember to take care of yourself, and probably also that just know that you're not alone. There are so many support systems out there. There's podcasts, there's journaling, there's therapy, anything. But just know that you are not alone. There's a beautiful community of people, lost parents, unfortunately, that are here to support you, to here to listen, here to talk. So yeah.
I love that. The big one you said there is taking it one day at a time. And
Hmm.
if anybody listening to this episode in particular has lost a child, please take Caitlin's advice about that, because taking it one day at a time is really the key to getting through that grief. Because
Hmm.
you're going to have some pretty intense grief waves that some days it's going to feel like you can't even leave the house. It is that bad. You're going to have days you feel fine and you're going to feel guilty for feeling fine. You're going to have those experiences too.
Hmm. Yeah.
So really just taking it one day at a time and giving yourself grace to just say, I'm not okay today. That's okay.
Hmm.
Um,
Absolutely. Yep.
so, Caitlin, I want to also ask you this question. If people
Yep.
want to connect with you, and also,
Yep.
by the way, listen to your podcast, because I'm going to be one of those
Sure.
people, where can we find you?
Yeah. So I am on Apple. I'm on iTunes. I'm also on Spotify. And then if you go to my Instagram page, Grief and Motherhood, you can find all the links in my bio there.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to be sharing all those links in the show notes. So when people listen to that, they can come and find you. Um,
Awesome.
you you've been an awesome guest today. I really love to dedicate this episode to your family, and I love to dedicate it
Oh,
to Esme and Adelaide and Lainey. Um,
thank you.
our rainbow babies have a special place in our
Yes,
heart.
yes. And
So
I can only imagine they're playing up there together, looking down on us, look at our parents, I love to think that. So
I love that. Well, Caitlin, thank you so much for being on the show. To all of our listeners who listen to this episode, thank you so much for joining Caitlin and I today on this episode of the Empowered Grief Journey. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with somebody that you know could benefit from this episode. The Empowered Grief Journey is all about honoring your journey and embracing your emotions and finding strength in your own time. I want to invite you to follow our podcast at empoweredgriefjourney.com. You're never alone on this journey, and together we can navigate grief with courage and compassion. Until next time, be kind to yourself and take your grief journey one step at a time.